All right, so you are in session 16. Hope everybody is enjoying the day today. Lots of great information from what I've been able to participate in and bear witness to. So glad you've joined our session here today. I'm Kelly Bussell, I'm your moderator, but I am going to leave it up to Glennon and Derek to introduce themselves. This is on connecting across boundaries to explore history and expand community. So Glennon and Derek.
Thank you, Kelly. We're really happy to be here. I actually just finished the Family Engagement Center Foundations in August, and so just excited to be back and talk about some of the work that Glennon and I have been doing over the past 4 years together, connecting across institutions and connecting across communities as well. So I am Derek Birch. I currently teach high school English at Olentangy High School in the morning, and in the afternoon I work on a nonprofit called Erase the Space, connecting students across the metro area, going to school in segregated schools essentially, and shared learning and collaborative creation together for democratic discourse and just imagining new ways of being together. And Glennon has been a partner in this with me for quite some time now, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Glennon Sweeney. I'm a senior research associate here at OSU at the Kerwin Institute for the study of race and ethnicity. I'm a trained planner, city and regional planner, and my research tends to focus on the intersection of metropolitan segregation and land use and development policy. And I focus on suburban spaces. And so I've been working with Derek. I also sit on the board of Erase the Space, and I've been working with Derek, as he said, for about 4 years. And so I think we can get into it.
Yeah, 4 years. And also like 4 years during the time of COVID, sometimes it's just like hard to fathom. We call this linking arms across institutions for change. One of the reasons is we like to think of ourselves at Erase the Space as our lane is to link arms. We are founded by two white teachers, and so we understand that there's not necessarily like it's not our space to go in and maybe run diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, but we can connect people with the right people because of how we're positioned, because I'm in the classroom at schools and I'm connected to lots of teachers across the metro area. We've been able to link arms across institutions, and we're going to talk a bit about the partnerships that we've created today and how we've done that. So one of the major challenges that we've been doing research on teachers and schools and how and why the kind of discourse that was modeled or at least even possible within schools is because schools are siloed and teachers are siloed. They're separated from every other sector. Teachers are generally like swamped in their classrooms. The bell rings and they're just like getting things ready for the next class. And there just isn't a lot of intermixing between schools, between districts, and especially not between institutions outside of public school. It's just not built for it. So some of the challenges that we know exist in engaging with schools is that they're siloed. And they're all siloed in different ways. There's different protocols, there's different boards, there's different hierarchies at each level in each school district. So having been able to navigate and network with a lot of different districts, right now currently we're in 15 different districts around Central Ohio. We know that like logistically it's hard to try and figure out how to get in touch with, who to get in touch with. And that's a big part of the reason it's a challenge. Another challenge is because schools are segregated, and there are different issues facing each school district, each school within a district, because there's, especially in Central Ohio, created inequality in these schools, and so we know they're also unequally funded and operated. So trying to figure out how to engage with one school with a program that maybe you've come up with doesn't work at another school because it's a completely different demographic with completely different needs, and having to be flexible and kind of humble in the way that we interact is necessary. So just those are our kind of what we're operating from today.
And I'm going to add one thing, Derek.
There we go.
One thing I do want to add also is that in Central Ohio in particular, there's also that kind of disjointment between local municipalities and local school districts, right? The city of Columbus is significantly larger than the Columbus City School District. The city of Worthington is significantly smaller than the Worthington City School District. And, you know, from an academics perspective, you know, most of my connections are with city officials and with people in departments at cities, particularly planning departments. And those people can't connect me with the schools. There's no connection in Central Ohio between a lot of these cities and their school districts. And so that makes it difficult for academics to identify who they know that knows someone on the inside, even sometimes.
And also, just given the positions in different districts, it may be the director of communications, it may be director of community outreach. There's just different ways that those are done in different districts. So those are our pictures of different silos that we wanted to have there as our visual. And so I'll let Glennon talk about the Kerwin Institute and their work with this.
Yeah, so I'm a senior research associate at the Kerwin Institute, as I said. And for those that don't know, the Kerwin Institute is an interdisciplinary research institute for the study of race and ethnicity here at Ohio State. And we kind of became famous by making opportunity maps. So I used an opportunity map. It's an older one, but it wasn't the other one I had, the resolution wasn't as good, the newer one. So I chose an older one so you could actually see the map. And things to note about Kerwin is we really focus on doing research that has an impact. We would like to directly impact policy and have in many cases with our research in the past. In Ohio, probably one of the big ones would be our work with the Ohio Housing Finance Agency over the last six or so years. We often engage in engaged research, so we're engaging with communities. Much of that research is often community-based and participatory, which means that from the very beginning of the process, we're working with the community partner on even identifying what is the research question we're asking. We are known for our spatial analysis, as I said, and the perspective we bring is really one of structural racialization. So we're really looking at what are the structures creating inequality and how is race related to that? And so that's kind of the perspective that we come from. I'm going to let Derek say a little bit about Erase the Space, his nonprofit, also next.
And I'm always happy to talk about it because it can be a misunderstood concept. A lot of times, as you can see down here, we have pen pals and Erase the Space. It's a nonprofit, and we made it a nonprofit so that we could fundraise to fund the actual exchanges because it's going to cost money to get kids food so they can eat lunch together when they meet, and all the other operations that happen there. But it's a year-long writing exchange surrounding shared learning between schools that essentially the policy is set up so kids don't meet each other. And the idea is that we can poke holes in school districts, allow kids the ability to connect across difference, and do it in a meaningful way with work to do together, as opposed to a pen pal program that can sometimes turn voyeuristic, like let me get a peek into your life, let me visit your school. And we've kind of pivoted away from those old models. We do not visit each other's schools. We know that schools are already loaded with mythology and social capital that kids know already, but it's also unfair for them to be the ones that have to explain it. And so we start with sharing letters, an introduction of yourself. You control your narrative, and it gets swapped with a partner that teachers have decided to pair students with. They then move on to shared learning, and it could be anything from mental health at school. We've done segregation in Central Ohio, to design thinking, and they get to exchange their reflections on what the learning was like for them. They get to keep going back and forth, but with this thing in common that is binding them together, this work to do together. And at the end of the year, they meet in person to collaborate and create something new that's either a solution to the issue or something that they can create and leave as a record for somebody else in the community. So it's this meaningful work together. We know that pen pals can sometimes, if it's not in the same physical space, it can lend itself to voyeurism. It can be transactional, which we do not want if we're trying to, help regrow some of the public discourse that we know is lacking. It needs to be something that is done from the heart. And so instead, we're not trying to reinforce this divide that already exists, and actually is not decided by any of them. But we do want to stress that there are common problems, even though they may impact us differently, that they're equal experts. They both belong at the table because they're bringing life experience that is invaluable to solving the problems, and that we have a shared neutral space where nobody has home court advantage, that is a public space. We've done it in the public library. Otterbein hosts us in their classrooms because they're out of school by the time that we're meeting at the end of the year. And this is not just a show and tell. It is something that we do together in terms of, simulating some sort of like citizenry. So our team has been built over the past. We started in 2016, 17, and it's built over time with different partnerships. But right now, we have a partnership with Otterbein and Ohio State through the Kerwin Institute. And since then, we've been able to find other ways to collaborate across Otterbein and Ohio State for institutional class collaborations and projects. We've created Next Hub, which is an online networking site for teachers in different school districts. So Erase the Space for Teachers, where we can collaborate and in supportive ways to have solidarity, to learn together, especially offering professional development the school districts are getting some pushback on because we're not connected to a school district. We've done research on what that looks like to collaborate across districts. And we're also starting to help Otterbein with their Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center because of this collaboration. So anything that I'm missing on this slide? I think I'm going to hand it over to you, Glennon.
TRHT is next. Are you sure you don't want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You are on that team.
It's true. I am on the steering committee. Yeah. So I know there's a lot of pieces here, but that's also kind of why we're here. It's because we have all these pieces kind of roped together. And I'll just go ahead and read what the Kellogg Foundation is or says it is. TRHT, so Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, is a comprehensive national and community-based process to plan for and bring about transformational and substantial change and to address the historic and contemporary effects of racism. At its core, TRHT will unearth and jettison the deeply held and often unconscious beliefs created by racism, the main one being the belief in a hierarchy of human value. This belief has fueled racism and conscious and unconscious bias throughout American culture and the perception of inferiority or superiority based on race, physical characteristics, or place of origin. And so the idea in this movement or this program that Otterbein has been named a campus center of is reminiscent of some of the other truth and reconciliation commissions found in South Africa or in Ireland or in Rwanda. There's just some hesitation for the word reconciliation for Americans. So it's called Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And there are three components. One is to tell the truth about a place, to reframe narratives, especially in Central Ohio. And Otterbein's focus is on education and reframing the truth about the educational history of Central Ohio. Racial healing is an actual process that was created by Dr. Gail Christopher, who is actually called RX racial healing, so like prescription racial healing. It's a circle methodology where you are deeply listening and you're sharing stories about yourself. Sometimes the questions will deal with race. Sometimes they'll just deal with telling a personal narrative so that people can connect on a deep level. If you don't know Dr. Gail Christopher, you might know Heather McGee, who wrote The Sum of Us, and that's her daughter. And she actually mentions TRHT in that book. Transformation is about changing policy and practice so that this is not just another book club, this is not just another movement, but we have action items beyond this. And we think that all of these things work together. And we also think that the team that we have created has a way of being able to see this happening in schools and a way to reach into schools, not just with students and teachers, but with families as well.
And so part of what we're doing, even before we get to this, Derek, this is our approach to collaboration. We should tell you about the project we're working on right now. I think
you're right.
right? And so what we're doing right now is we're really working to tell honest history, really, and expose truthful history in communities and empower communities to do that. And so, the TRHT framework really lays out how to do racial healing circles well. They'll train you how to do racial healing circles. But in terms of truth, there is really no framework for how you actually expose the truth of say a given community. And so what we learned is that with Kerwin's work, we do a lot of work on structural racialization. What are the policies and structures that led to the segregation that we experience today? And my work as a trained urban planner, I really focus on those related to land use and development, which I think are really critical and the most important policies, in my opinion, in terms of creating, the segregated society that we experience today. But Otterbein brings in this education piece. And when we think about engaging community members in terms of like just community members engaging in this work, high school students potentially and college students, we wanted to have a framework for how to do the truth part. And so what our team is doing is creating kind of a truth framework, a framework for the exploration of local history that can engage community members, also can engage classrooms, potentially through erase to space exchanges or through other ways. And we're actually in conversations with the Worthington and Westerville school districts right now about how this might look. And in terms of college classes, as Derek said, so Derek teaches a class at Otterbein University with Margaret Kohler, and it's called The Problems We All Live With. And they pretty much use some of our framework, and students do kind of independent explorations of often their own community's history in that. And so the idea is, how can we use that class and maybe combine it with a planning studio at OSU? And have, because planning students can bring in spatial analysis, right? They can bring in the land use policies that got us here. And they have a different perspective. And the education students at Otterbein can bring in the education policy. They're being trained in how to collect oral histories. And so if we can combine and bring these forces together, we might be able to tell a more complete story. And then with the Kerwin Institute's spatial analysis expertise, we can take what is created and create an interactive story map for that community that the hope is can be housed in that community, because that data is the community's data at the end of the day. And so you can have a living kind of database that's interactive that shows and takes people through the history, and it can constantly be updated and added all the way down to the neighborhood level. How was this neighborhood formed? Did they use racial restrictions, or what kinds of restrictive covenants were used? How did they influence the zoning code? Was there a neighborhood association? What schools has this neighborhood gone to within the school district? Has their feeder pattern changed? And answering questions like that to understand and kind of rewrite those community narratives and compare it to what is kind of the official story of this community, right? That I've been told growing up here, and how does my research compare? And so that's kind of the project that we're working on together, that is really involving the TRHT Center, Erase the Space Next Hub, and then Kerwin on that other side. And so just to kind of get you all up to speed in what we're talking about. But in terms of how we build collaborations, and the collaborations are what make this work possible, Derek's going to talk a little bit about our approach.
It's an approach that it's very reflective of what we do with Erase the Space. When we want our students to engage across districts, across classrooms, across geographic locations that are separated and historically have been, due to a lot of what Glennon was talking about. And the first thing we do when we exchange letters is that they're going to sit with their partner's letter and really think about it. So we know that listening first is key, especially when dealing with schools, because a lot of times, I can speak from experience, there's a program right now that has been brought in, but I don't know that any teacher was asked about it. And so really listening to what schools need, and that changes from year to year and even throughout the year, is key to partnering with us.
And I would say from the academic perspective, we need to do a better job, academics, of listening to our community partners from the beginning, instead of coming in necessarily with our ideas at the onset, which kind of gets into the second point around radical humility. I had Derek put the radical in front because I think for academics, it really does need to be radical because we are not good at it, at humility. And, when you're engaged, there are power dynamics when you're coming, especially when you're coming from a big university like the Ohio State University at play. And, if we don't practice humility and make it really an integral part of how we interact with community partners, I think it makes it very difficult to have successful collaborations.
And I agree. And I'll also just add that if teachers are who you want to bring in and partner with, we're just a tough bunch. We're a stubborn bunch. And oftentimes we get treated like like we're not professionals. And not saying that happens by academics, that happens just in our own districts. So when somebody comes in and they ask us what we think, we get real excited. somebody cares what we think. So that, I think that's part of it, is that just knowing the current existence of teachers is different than it was a couple years ago.
Yeah, and there's a difference between engaging teachers directly and engaging administration also.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to talk more about that, Derek, but
yeah, I would say there's different levels, and anybody that's been working with schools knows that administration is probably how you're going to get in to the school. Teachers are really there. We have too much going on to be fielding emails about opportunities, but it's also once we are engaged, it's about seeing what we need for our classes, because for us it's different on a week-to-week basis based on where our kids are, what happened in the community recently. Year to year it's different, and so you're going to be kind of just having two different types of conversations. Anybody that's doing this right now knows what I'm talking about. It's the one that gets you in the building, and then the one that engages teachers are two very different conversations. Which is why I've been an adherent to Emergent Strategy, which is our next one. That is a term that is coined by Adrienne Marie Brown and the now I'm forgetting her, or the Emergent Strategy Institute, but there's a whole entire network that uses it. It's the idea that there's a lot of ideas that are in it, but it's what you pay attention to grows. There's no use in getting locked into exactly what you think is going to come from this collaboration, because if you're dealing with schools, there are so many different variables. But what is always going to be constant is the people that are involved. And the people that are involved are the only ones that can do something a certain way. So let's figure out what that way is with who we have. It's not having these defined ideas and outcomes that we want, but it's having a meeting with no agenda, getting to know and connect and see the depth of the human beings that are involved, which gives us more possibilities of what could happen. Glennon, you can talk about finding the boundary objects, but before
I think
that Emergent Strategy, go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, meetings with no agendas are something that academics never want to do. And I talk about this a lot, and people look at me like I'm weird, but if you want a successful collaboration with a community partner, any community partner, school or anything else, you have to build trust. And you build trust by getting to know people. And so the best way to do that is to literally sit down and have coffee with someone and get to know them and learn what it is that drives them, what it is they're interested in, and that'll help you find your boundary object or the issue around which you can build a collaboration. And that's really finding, and it helps you identify your shared values. It helps you identify if this is an entity that you share values with, because shared values are important in terms of building a successful collaboration. And so a lot of academics think it's a waste of their time to just meet with someone without, an agenda or an outcome that they're shooting for. But a lot of times the agenda can just be get to know someone, and the outcome is building a relationship. And that relationship can, there are people I have known for years that I'm only now starting to collaborate with. And it's because I took the time to build the relationship. And, I think it's just really important, and it's something that academics don't place enough value on.
And you're speaking also to collaborative, not transactive, because oftentimes there is a view of a hierarchy of knowledge or of importance because of institutions. And I think that all of these kind of work well together. I'll say that just for like a visual, oftentimes when we collaborate, even just on like the high school level, if we have group work, people will envision building something together. And Emergent Strategy challenges us to imagine growing something together. We find out what that seed is, and then we water it. What we pay attention to grows. And this picture to the right is an example of something that came through meetings with no agenda and something emerging. We knew that Kerwin had some really interesting research that was the foundation for why we were doing what we were doing at Race to Space. But we were the ones operating with kids. We were operating with the students on the ground that were recipients of this legacy. And so the thing that emerged was once we got kids together and we taught them, hey, this is the modern iteration of segregation that still exists. And then they met at the end of the exchange, they get to collaborate and create ideas. Like, what do you think would be a good solution to this? And one of them was a scavenger hunt. And so this came about because we were patient enough to let something emerge, and students are the ones that brought us to it. And we had stations around Southside, Parsons, German Village, and kids went around to go find maps created by Kerwin. And then they had to collaborate to tell the story of what the maps said. They had to figure it out.
We didn't create the redlining map. We just used that one.
Yes. But just different maps that they had to make sense of. And that came from, we got coffee. We talked about what we did. We knew that there were some intersections. We knew that we were going to use some maps. And then all of a sudden, a group of students goes, you know what would be a really good thing for people to do together? A scavenger hunt. We love scavenger hunts. So we did it. And this picture is the culmination of that for us. But it's something that we couldn't have imagined or planned for or built. We had to let it grow, and we had to let other people help it grow.
It was so much fun. It was one of the most fun things I've done, in my job in a very long time.
This was on a Saturday during the school year, and we had 25, 30 kids show up and pair up in groups to go around and make sense of maps.
Yep.
It was cool. So this approach and how it really relates, like we talked about, this is very much modeled after our Erase the Space model of exchange. And we know that a student learning exchange may seem different than a community collaboration with schools, but you're still in some sort of exchange. The culture of what you're bringing to the culture of school is still something that needs to be navigated. And so this is how we think it translates into this working across institutions. Our narrative sharing that we do, you write a letter to an unknown partner, teachers pair you up with somebody that they think is a good fit for you. We sit and we talk and we get to talk about our kids. And I'm like, Ella says she hates class, but she doesn't. And my partner's like, yeah, but Dejan got them. And we pair them up. We make sure that students who have identities that may be marginalized or even harmed by other people, that we put them with someone who we think they'll be safe with. But other than that, it is just about narrative sharing. And so we think that's much like the meeting with no agenda. It can, you don't have to write a letter to an unknown person at school, but you can sit down with them and just, start with talking about something interesting that happened yesterday and let the conversation flow from there. It doesn't have to be about what you're getting to right away. But it also could be very much about what you're passionate about. The shared learning and reflection is really important for us so that it doesn't become a pen pals program that can be voyeuristic, or it can be I'm going to take some of your experience and I'm going to consume it. And that's going to be, I'm just going to come away from this knowing something more.
And I want to point out that this is true for both how Erase the Space engages students and how Erase the Space engages teachers.
Great job.
Because Erase the Space, in order to do Erase the Space, if you're a teacher in your classroom, you have to go through a training. And there are experts who come in and do some of the sessions in that training, but the training mirrors in a lot of ways how the kids, so you're with the partner that you will be doing the exchange with, you go through a lot of the same steps that the students do in that, and it helps the teachers know what they're going to be implementing. It also helps them build that relationship and get to know each other. It breaks down any misconceptions they might have about the other person's school district when they have those conversations. That, well, I just wanted to point that out. So it works.
That's great.
All kinds of people pairing up. You can do, and we did an adult exchange. When was that? Last summer? I don't even remember.
No, it was last January and February.
Okay, last winter. Where it was just community members who, people who, a lot of them parents who had expressed interest in Erase the Space, and let them focus on, making their school districts more inclusive and stuff, I think was the topic we were focused on for that. But it's a really neat approach. So go on, sorry, I just wanted to point that out.
And you're right, we take teachers through shared learning, just like we do with our students, and they're reflecting together as they go along. And then the teachers' collaboration is, what is the shared learning going to be for our students? They get to create that after they've gone through this and decide what works for their classroom. It's flexible for the students in front of them. And our students at the end get to collaborate and create what they think a solution is. And in the same way, we think that, having that meeting with no agenda, but then also finding out what the shared values are, the goals of both organizations are, so it's collaborative. Create a container for discourse. We wade into the tension with students, and then we get out of the way. So I think that the main crossover here is not to get stuck or hooked on what you think the outcome can be, but just wade into the possibilities.
And this, and much of this is also how we are trying to do the work of exploring local history and community. We do want communities to do this work. We are going to get out of the way, but we're going to be there as a resource to provide support. And Erase the Space is there for a resource to the teachers. The teachers are then there as a resource to the students. And we might want to, before we get into the activity, maybe we should pause for questions.
Sure.
Right now, and see if there are any questions, if there's anything anyone's unclear about, anything anyone wants to add or say, or anything you could teach us.
Glennon and I both talk fast, and we work together often, so we're always open for questions because there's lots of threads we're tying together as well.
Maybe there are no questions. I don't know. You can just unmute yourself and ask, as far as I'm concerned, if you have a question. Man, awesome. You look like a group who's in for the last session of the day. All right, we're going to split you guys into dyads then. Maybe I should start the breakout rooms. Well, you want to explain it, Derek, and I can start create.
That works.
How many people do we have?
Minus us. Well, there's 34.
Yeah. I'm going to get it to 2 people. There we go. It's going to sign.
So here's our activity as you are getting people paired up.
I'm going to wait to hit create so that they hear your explanation before we send them off.
Got it. The first thing you're going to do is you're just going to have a meeting with no agenda. You're just going to have a conversation with somebody here. Maybe it's about the common experience that you've had today, and it's just time to let your experience catch up to you. But the goal is usually to, when you get to know this other person with no agenda, like what are some shared values? What's something that you could work on together? But a good way to start that conversation is food or music. It's something that's pretty universal and always interesting if it's different. It doesn't necessarily put up our defenses. But during the conversation, here's the key. We want to practice deep listening. It's the phrase I always try to tell my students when we're having class discussions. Don't think about what you're going to say next. I'm not going to give you points just because your hand went up. We want to wait until that other person has spoken and then take it in. practicing radical humility, and sometimes just giving some gratitude of like, thanks for sharing that with me. I think a lot of times, especially I'm sure people that are on this call, we're just busy. We move very fast to lots of different places, but that pause or just that permission to pause and say thanks is important in these relationships. And what you'll do. Are we going to do takeaways when they come back, or is this something
we'll do that when they come back? Because that was the one we didn't know if we'd have time for that, but no one's asking questions, so we should. And I put the directions that are on this slide into the chat for you guys, because I know once you go to the breakout rooms, you're not going to be able to see it. So hopefully you can copy it from there if you want to refer to it. Are there any questions before we send you off to just have a conversation, have a meeting with no agenda? And do you want to do like 7 minutes, Derek? Is that enough, do you think, or should we do a full 10?
No, I think 7 is probably enough. Okay.
Any questions? I'm gonna hit the button in a second. All right, I'm sending you guys.
Hello, everybody, coming back. We're about 15 seconds away from everybody coming in. And just a warning for those that are in here, we're going to ask if people are comfortable sharing anything they learned, any shared values that might have been there, if it was comfortable or uncomfortable. And everyone's here, Glennon.
All right. Now people have their cameras on.
Yay.
I just saw someone cover theirs.
it's very, yeah, that's what high school students do. When we had Zoom, they fought tooth and nail to not have their cameras on. Yeah. So.
No, that was me. I just look like I'm freezing in my office. So I'm like shutting off the video so you can't see me.
That's all right.
All right. As long as people talk, we just want to gather some thoughts about what it was like to engage without an agenda, with just a connection.
Yeah, and hopefully you didn't know the person you were thrown into the room with.
So is anybody willing to unmute themselves? And even if you just like want to raise your hand and then we can call on you, then that's fine too. But anybody willing to share about the experience?
I don't mind sharing. So my name is Mara. It was just really interesting. Out of everybody around here, I actually got paired up in a room with somebody who works in a district or a neighborhood, like within probably 15, 20 minutes of me. So I thought that was just really cool.
Very good.
Yeah.
I was the one that she got paired with, and so it was interesting to just focus on the things that they're doing within their school district to reach out to families, and getting so creative with, funds that we have out there. Sometimes, it's been difficult for some schools to, utilize some of the grant money they have, but her district was able to do so in creating actually what, the work that she's doing. So, and, to kind of collaborate for 7 minutes, I'm going to use that word, so close by where I'm at. So that was nice.
Excellent.
Anybody else?
I was paired up with Sabine, and we were in a deep conversation, and then we got booted out of our chat rooms. But it's nice to talk to her because she actually fought for her position, saw a need, and wanted to make something happen. And she actually lives in the same area that my middle brother lives in Ohio, because I'm in Colorado. And so it's nice a little Dublin connection.
Nice.
Finding those connections is fun. Doug, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, me and Marissa had a great conversation, one from Cleveland, one from Columbus, big places, but we both wound up agreeing that your relationship building is sometimes a lifelong process, and what goes around comes around. And invariably, even if you're in two of the biggest cities in Ohio, your reputation with that person, you're going to know somebody. And so how you've treated people in the past becomes very much the present. You're going to see the same people. So don't leave the relationship building just for its own little silo. It's lifelong.
Love that.
Yeah, and that's the part where academics struggle, I feel, the most. And so, Kelly, this session ends at 3, correct?
I was just messaging you. Yes, it does.
Okay. And, since it is Friday, we definitely don't want to keep you guys past 3 at all. But we do want to, Kelly asked us, well, you guys were in your breakouts. Well, how did you two meet? And I think that story is also illustrative of how you can go about building these kinds of partnerships. And so Derek's going to kind of walk you through kind of how he got to Kerwin and discovered us and how those conversations made this collaboration possible in the first place.
It's interesting because as Maura was talking, it was somebody that was right next door to her that she was paired with, right? And that literally is how Glennon and I ended up meeting is, we have this for a partner thing. We don't have time, but this is a good takeaway to think about how our networks could be literally right next door. The person I talked to was my neighbor, Bill, who he's a grant coordinator. He's a former Ohio State professor. And I was doing this project, and we had the first exchange, and I was really excited about it. And I told him as we were just, on the opposite sides of the chain link fence, and he said, "It sounds a lot like somebody I know named Dustin. You should meet Dustin." I said, "All right, yeah, set me up." Dustin worked at OSU Extension. He was a 4-H coordinator and worked with the ag school. Seemed like we were very different in what we were doing, but our shared values were very similar. So we got to meet and we started talking about some things that may be able to cross over. But it was when he texted me this map that I was like, what is this? Where did it come from? I need this. This is exactly why Erase the Space exists. He said, well, I was at a presentation. I know somebody that works at the Kerwin Institute. I said, well, let's set something up because that would be amazing if we could talk about this and why Erase the Space is trying to do something to make this map look different. And once we sat down in a room at Ohio State with a bunch of whiteboards, after 2 hours, because we just kept talking of meeting, we were covered with ideas and lists. And since then, we just started to try and figure out what is going to be the best for both of our organizations in a collaboration. There was nothing that was forced. We really wanted to leverage what we had for the other organization in a true partnership. So it was just interesting that it literally came from me talking to my neighbor and them going, I know somebody, and just following up on that. So it wasn't anything I just cornered Glennon at a conference. We just got connected through other people.
Although cornering can work sometimes too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to just walk up to random people that you see speak at an event or something that you think you might want to collaborate with, or cold calling essentially. Don't be afraid of that, walking up to them or just emailing people who you have heard of or seen speak at an event or, seen some of their work product or something. Just email them and take the time to, engage and explain who you are and where you're coming from. And I think it's much easier personally to build collaborations outside of the university than inside because there's so much less ego to deal with. And there are people that just want to do things and see results and fix problems. And academics, as much as I'm in academia to fix problems, a lot of academics aren't interested in fixing problems. They'd rather describe them. And I want to fix them. I think that we have to understand them to fix them. So I do describe them, but then I go that next step. And that's what most of the work at the Kerwin Institute is about. But I think that's all we have. And, there are 4 minutes left in this hour. And I think that so that you guys will like us more, we are willing to give them back to you.
Yeah.
And I dropped the survey for the summit. If you haven't yet already, we've asked that you only complete it one time and being that as a part of your last session. So I'm assuming this is it. We're all going to other things for the rest of the day. So please take time. We've appreciated your time. Thank you, Glennon and Derek, for your time and sharing what you're doing. So yeah, thanks for spending the day with us.
Yep. Have a lovely weekend, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy Friday.
Yes,
Yep.
happy
Thank
Friday.
you. Happy Friday.
Thank you.